All right. Mic check. I'm good. So I'm Max Ceron. CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest. Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, looking out for great talent and stories to find out there in the world of welding. Well, today I have Helen Liene Dreifelds coming to us from New Haven, Connecticut, which is not where she lives, but where she's going for school right now, or lives there for school, but maybe not lives there forever. I don't know. We'll find out in this episode. But Helen, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
So let's start right off on the top. I hear that you're a pretty cool artist.
Oh, thanks.
Is this true? Is it your jam?
The jury's still out there. Yeah, what is really cool, you know? Yeah.
Well, what do they say? If you're not trying to be cool, then you're cool.
Right. Yeah. So maybe it's that.
So Helen, we've got you on the show because your initial contact with CWB was through one of my staff, right? Daniela Torelli, who is wonderful. Anyone who's been on the podcast knows Daniela. Or if you've seen us at a conference or somewhere in person, she's the lady with the what's it called? The portfolio and the papers and the clipboard behind me, yelling at me, telling me what to do and where I should be. She's very crucial to the operations of the association. And you took a course under her.
Yes, I did. I did the West program. So I think it was the first kind of project or pilot of it. So Welding and Employment Skills program, I believe. I can't remember what the acronym was. But
Welding Employment Skills Training, I believe. Yeah.
Training, right, is the last one. Yeah, and it was, life-changing for sure. It was, everything I wanted in a program to help me get my foot into the door into welding.
So let's start with what that program was, and then we'll go backwards from there. So, what was that program that you took, and what did you learn in there?
Yeah, I mean, my memory could be a little bit off, but it was 12 weeks, sort of primarily MIG welding, and really just getting some certifications and learning how to weld. And it also included some like welding theory as well, which was really great, and some employment strategies, as well as just the day-to-day how to work in a shop and what's sort of involved as, making really good welds.
And when you enrolled in this program, I guess, why? What was it that attracted you? Were you someone that was thinking about welding as a career, or were you kind of like hobbyist or just, checking out new things to learn?
Yeah, I guess I've had lots of different sort of, careers or different ways that I have made money over my life. But at that time, I had just finished, I was a brick tinter, so working in custom tinting and masonry, restoration work, that kind of thing, but it's seasonal. And I had also just finished this like women transitioning to trades and employment program through George Brown. So that was really the sort of initial where I sort of said, okay, welding is the thing I want to do. We had different people come through, either millwright or tool and die, but I was really excited about this idea of welding. And so when the West program came through that kind of employment program, and I was in between the jobs, it was perfect. It was CERB. I had CERB at the time as well, which helped me that decision to be able to do that. And a lot of people helped me out to be able to attend, and just in terms of like the commute coming from downtown Toronto to Milton. And I was also learning to drive at the time, lots of different things. Yeah, it was, it was a transition period due to losing all my employment. And, I was like, I'd always thought about the trades, and I felt like I needed that sort of financial and job.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is it. Yeah.
So when you say you've thought about the trades, you were in brickwork masonry as a brick tinter. So you were already kind of looking at that avenue in general as a way to work. Had you been involved in the trades for a long period of time already? Had you tried a few things, or was this kind of like the initial, experimentation into the trades?
I mean, I think as like a visual artist, you're always sort of working with your hands, particularly in sculpture. And I also, yeah, I think, being an install assistant, helping people with their exhibitions, like lifting, moving, putting things together, coming
Hanging, figuring out how things got to go. Yeah.
up with like solutions for a random thing. You need the thing that fits with the thing to make the thing work. As basic as that sounds, so I think that's always been in the background. And yeah, I think, both parents working within like sort of the performing arts as well as, multiple different jobs. But yeah, particularly like my dad being like a carpenter for a long time, and then also having his own kind of contracting business. It's always been around. So that was always something around, I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a good spot because now we can go back in time. So now let's go back in time to where your roots are from. All right. So where were you born? What part of the country were you from? And tell us about the inception of Helen's life.
Yeah. I'm born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. On River Street, so in the area of Toronto called Regent Park. And then later on moved to Joliette, like in Quebec, and then also Fredericksburg, Virginia, and then back to Toronto. And then at 17, I moved to Montreal, and then moved a bunch of other places. But yeah, that's sort of in a nutshell. But mostly English and French speaking Canada.
Okay. And what did your parents do? You said your dad was kind of in construction, but both your parents were in the performing arts. So what did they do?
So my mom is a translator, essentially. So kind of part of the team that developed surtitles. So essentially subtitles, but for performing arts. And then my dad has done lots of different things, but including like stage manager within the performing arts, and then having his own business as like a sort of handyman contracting.
So he probably built a lot of sets.
Yes, there's been a lot of sets and a lot of touring sets and things that need to, come up and come down. Yeah.
Yeah. My daughter's in the performing arts. So she's a musician, a flute player, professional, and she teaches music now. And as a construction dad,
yes,
I built a lot of sets. I was just up in Grand Prairie for her first large school performance, and she's like, "Dad, this is like one of the first times you're not going to be around to help build a set." And I was like, "I'm coming."
Yeah.
Road trip, yeah.
Yeah, so supportive. That's great. Yeah.
Well, the arts is there's lots of work. I don't know where this concept came from so many years ago. I feel like almost in society created a narrative that artists need to be broke, artists need to be poor and struggle, and that and that they should undervalue themselves and not charge. And I feel like the newer generations are more down with like, hey, art is a vocation, art is a career. You can do it every day, and you should be able to make a living off of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, but I mean, I think that for a variety of reasons, depending on what your work looks like and the sort of, systems that you're working within, the granting system is wonderful that we have in Canada, but at a certain point, that's not always like a secure source of income. And
Right.
If you don't necessarily commercial work, the artist lobby like CARFAC only offers so much for an artist fee. There's all sorts of. So, trying to like, coming up to like, being 35 and thinking like, okay, how do I create like long-term financial stability is, that's where the trades really came in. I was like very excited. And that's where I decided to become an apprentice. Right now I'm back in school, but, I don't see the two as like,
contradicting,
Yeah, I see them actually as like, two things living together, and both benefiting each other. The technical thinking is also really great with the abstract thinking, and I think the two go hand in hand. And I think, both require a sense of both invention, but also, there's gravity.
Yeah,
There's
and understanding form and understanding pull and the materials, because no matter what art you're in, you have a material that you need to understand to work with it, right?
And that's something I think I learned a lot through working in metal fabrication, was thinking, it's just like watching how different people approach a material and their innate understanding through experience. It's like you really learn something, not to romanticize too much, but
no, romanticize away. Like, I mean, that's a reality to it. People often don't understand welders and how much we do romanticize our trade. We talk about, how much we love welding and how awesome it is. And you don't see too many people do that in their jobs. You don't run into a lot of, lawyers that brag about lawyering or whatever the job is. But welders, we tend to go out there and be like, yeah, we did that thing. And I think there is a sense of artistry to it, of a form, of something being visually satisfying, even, in the construction of even the most, like basic structures, to a welder become very visually satisfying, to be like, that is built perfectly square. That makes me feel good. Even though it's just a mathematical thing that this measures the same in both directions, I feel good about that, like.
Yeah, well, it's like a huge accomplishment to get to the point that things are not distorted or that things are working to code, but also a sense of like you're working on something that's larger than yourself. It's like it's a team always. It's even if you might be working individually at your bench or your spot, like in the end, it's something that's larger than you. And to participate in the built environment, I think is that's quite a powerful position and not something to be thinking lightly about. And, there's potential for changing the built environment as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like maybe not on a day-to-day that's maybe larger scale shifts, but yeah.
Now, in terms of, the connection between metal and art, it's popular. It's gotten very popular, or I would say over the last decade. There's shows on TV. There's things that happen. There's a kind of a glamorization of the industry, which I'm all for. I think this is good. Gets it in front of people. Now, for yourself as an artist, I feel like you've probably been an artist your whole life. This has been a conscious career choice for you. At what point were you like, steel would be a good medium to work in? Or was it never, like you said, like they're meeting now, but when you took the West program, were you secretly thinking, I can use this for art as well? Or were you like, no, this is just to get a job and that stability?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a little bit of like, ooh, new material. Yeah, not gonna lie, and yes, to respond to like, metal's having a hot moment right now, but yeah, but I guess I got a grant through the Toronto Arts Council to learn some welding through a continuing education program, because I was looking for a way to create armatures or relate my textile work into like a more three-dimensional space. So it was really out of that sort of kind of practical problem solving. And I was also starting to weave with stainless steel wire as well. So kind of coming up to the edges of what weaving or metal or what thread or cloth is perceived as. So it was really, I guess, through like a sort of practical approach, like, oh, metal will be the way that I can,
convey that.
Yeah, convey that, and also has like a interesting contrast to textiles, which, wood would not be the right material, I think. Maybe stone and textile, but yeah, metal seemed like the way to really flip that perceived invisibility of textiles with something that is so ubiquitous in our environment, just like textiles, but has in some senses more presence, I guess.
Because it is everywhere around us.
Yeah, it is everywhere around us, and there's something really interesting about the recyclability of it, but also applications. It's not as if steel is only wonderful. There's a lot of questions around like the built environment and how that is created, but I guess that lined up with my ideas around textiles as like cosmologies or ways of thinking about the world. So that was my initial contact with welding, and then I really wanted to be a bricklayer. I just because it looked very much like weaving, like these sort of
Piece by
patterns.
piece, yeah.
Yeah, an interest in like sort of this tinting that is like not going to ruin the surface. It's sort of like in connection to the material rather than placing something on top of. So that sort of restoration aspect was interesting to me.
It's
And
a tough
then
material, brick, though. It's not very flexible, right?
it's not flexible. And I also, the seasonality again,
Hmm.
and having, worked, and I haven't always been an artist. Yeah, that sort of was something later on. Like my initial interests were more within like sort of social work or community work.
Okay.
I started with, and then slowly it turned into art.
So tell me about that. How did you fall into art? Because I've had a lot of people on the show who are artists, and they're like in my experience, they're that kid you see in grade 5 who can already draw better than everyone in the school. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, you're going to be an artist unless something in their home life pushes them away from art, which does happen. To let roam free as a spirit, you can't really put an artist down. Like they have this need to express themselves, which I love and appreciate since I'm not very artistic. But you said you kind of got into it later. So how did that process, or was it like you uncovered a seed that was dormant, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I guess in my mind, everyone has a need to create or some sort of form of expression, and that exists within anybody.
Hmm.
Like it's sort of what is the thing that drives you? Everyone has something. Um, and perhaps it doesn't show up in like the ways that we understand is like visual art or performing art or like that sort of like
Hmm.
categorical way.
Category, yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's like I don't know how to draw like in the way that, here's an apple and make it look like an apple, but I think that's like there's like an idea that like art is like kind of stuck sometimes in this like one way of understanding, like, oh, you must be really great at realism, or that there is some sort of or it's like abstract, or it's like the, excruciating psyche, or all these sort of
You have
like
to fall
tropes.
underneath a label, yeah.
Yeah, I mean tropes, and that happens with the trades too. There's like tropes and stereotypes that I think any vocation or career or passion has, and it's sort of, that really flattens the actual identity and person's relationship to something. So yeah, I guess
Yeah.
I don't think I really answered your question, but
No,
just
but you
wanted to.
do bring up a point. Like when you talk about flattening the identity of any work or spectrum or field, I see that on both ends. Like I've been in the game long enough to see that sometimes you have to flatten it for people to kind of see it.
Yeah.
Because it's maybe too complex to see initially. So you got to create kind of the 2D. Like, hey, just take a look at this, see
Yeah.
if it attracts you, and if it does, then we'll kind of start pulling the layers apart, right? So my question was initially like, how did you get into the art? Like
Right.
you went into social. You said you wanted to do like the human services careers, you know,
Yeah.
and which are noble and needed within themselves through an all a halo or altruistic lens. How did art form out of that?
Yeah, I was working with youth, and I felt like a lot of youth I was working with are like trilingual, particularly in the context of Montreal. So, um, I just felt that in order, like the life skills programming wasn't working. Like in a lot of social services, there's a lot of life skills programming, and just it doesn't seem to. I was just frustrated with the social service field.
Yeah.
So I thought, what's something that will connect instantly to multiple different cultures or people or age ranges, demographics. And I was thinking, well, textiles. And when you're doing activities together, then there's more of a buy-in. Like we can talk about group dynamics, we can talk about addictions, we can talk about sort of those things that are close to the heart and might be difficult to talk about in other settings.
Yeah.
It's too much of a sort of social service agency kind of relationship. It's not necessarily like the place where trust can be built always as easily. I mean, these are generalizations,
Hmm.
but yeah. So textiles plus language. So then I went to a CEGEP program in a French CEGEP, and I sort of thought, oh, textiles. I didn't really know what I was getting into, and it was like a very technical, like woven and knit, constructed textile, like precision, and is sort of, yeah, very technical. It was a technical degree. And I thought I was just going to take like one semester in order to then be able to continue social services. But then I realized that maybe I was the youth that I was looking to help,
Right.
sort of switching that perception. And also, I think social services are valuable, but there's a lot of, I was looking for other ways to make change, I guess.
Yeah. And the social services are something that are, well, obviously very much needed, and even a marker of a successful society is to have a strong social network. But at the end of the day, the mechanisms are always under some type of scrutiny or funding or, ulterior benchmark that makes it really hard to do the job well, right?
Yeah, I think it's something within many different fields. There are sort of ways that you need to navigate to figure out how to be able to reach the excellence or the change that you're looking for. Yeah. So
the swing into there, you're like, okay, I'm going into art. Now, are you the type of person that's going to be, I'm all in, I am now going to devote my life to this branch of that I'm pursuing, or was it a soft transition of like, I'm going to keep doing this and try to learn this on the side of my desk type of thing?
I would say that it's sort of there can be a little bit of a intensity when I like something or I'm interested in something, then I will really dive into it. And the program was a 3-year and quite intensive, and I've always had multiple jobs at the same time as well. It's sort of, so it always felt like I could still do either volunteering or working or doing contract jobs or gig, so it was all kind of like
you can still scavenge a lifestyle.
Yeah, always looking for work. Someone wants, someone needs anything. Yeah, so I think, I guess the big change was that I got into this residency that I thought was going to be just 1 year of subsidized studio space, but I didn't realize, again, I guess I'm, not always realizing the full extent of like when I applied to something and realized it was going to be 3 years. It ended up being a 3-year program, which was great. And that really, I think, was a big moving point from like kind of solidifying, I guess, gaining confidence in what I was interested in and like being part of a larger community and still teaching. I was doing a lot of teaching and contract work and working with youth, but also I worked with senior. I was still doing both. So somehow.
And what's the field you would teach in? Like, what was your specialty that people would reach out to you for learning?
I was bilingual, or I'm trilingual. Y en poquito español también. Yo necesito practicar.
Bueno, si quieres hablar en español, yo soy de Chile, puedo hablar en español.
Sí, yo sé. French, English, Latvian, but in Toronto, there was a lot of need for bilingual, part-time or contract-based teaching. So I worked, looking at sort of, I worked within museum settings, but also technology settings, and also just visual arts, all sorts of settings. So I guess people reached out to me due to the bilingualism and also the background in group facilitation. So that really probably was how I was able to get those jobs.
Yeah. And now you're going through the art program, and this is you said what, 3 years?
The MFA program here is 2 years.
2 years.
Two-year
Okay.
program.
So you enroll into the MFA program, and what was, usually you have to pick your medium or pick what you're going to specialize into, kind of what did you go into? What was your goal?
Yeah, I mean, at Yale, it's like a little bit different than other schools where it might be more interdisciplinary, although it might be interdisciplinary in the idea. But I want to do sculpture because I'm concerned with space, like how space is created. in sort of a very quick nutshell. But I knew that I was going to be sculpture, and I see textiles as sculpture. They're three-dimensional. They also are painting and sculpture. So that was sort of the reasoning.
And how was it challenging for you to get into this new space, new crowd, new thinkers? You know, was it a challenge, or did you feel like this was meant to be your home?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any, having had so many transitions and working with different people and in different like sort of work settings or school settings, like from French to English to, in a lot of like different experiences. So this is just another one. It's definitely, a pinch me moment, like, whoa, I'm at this like school that I never, sort of, there's always like a moment where, you remember someone saying like, oh, you're not university material, or, like sort of just different struggles one has had over their lifespan, and then realizing, you're here, and that's always like, it's exciting. It's exciting to be in a space. It's a luxury to be pursuing knowledge and, within the setting and with peers who are just as passionate about their work and wanting to build, that's the, it's, yeah.
It's the passion.
But it's rigorous, I'm used to working many jobs, but I would say that this is also rigorous in a different way.
It doesn't give you a lot of time to be doing lots of part-times outside of school.
No, I'd say this is a very, very full-time job, school program. Every day is quite busy. And there's lots of different opportunities or talks or things to check out, or people coming to visit in your studio to talk about your work, presentation. There's lots to do. But I am working as a work study as well. So I'm working in the fabrication shop. So that's also interesting, but another layer of like, it's just different than like a shop.
So you're coming into like, I mean, up until this point, your path has given you a lot of skills, right? You've pulled in a lot of skills from a lot of different areas, and the West program being in there in terms of welding. Yeah. So like before this program, but after West, let's look at that window. Like you do enroll into this welding program. It's fairly in depth. You come out with some actual welding certificates and qualifications, and you're kind of ready to work. So at the end of the West program, what happened? Did you get out and get a job? Did you become an apprentice? Walk us through that part.
Yeah, I mean, it's thanks to Danny and Donna. Like, I would have never had the courage to, think that I could work in welding, and I was I had like a whole, I'm sort of one of those like Excel sheet, like looked at all the places I wanted to work at and how much the commute time is and like what potential, like I wanted to work in a smaller shop because I wanted to be able to do the range of activities and hopefully a place that would allow me to grow and be flexible with something a little bit more untraditional. But because I still wanted to continue my art practice, but still be dedicated to welding or metal fab. So there was a place I really wanted to work for that does also art fabrication, but I was a little bit too green for them. And then they suggested another spot called Discreet, and that was like life changing, just like West. It was like that was a beautiful transition from one to the other. It was around the corner from where I was living at the time. I could walk or bike to work, which is not very common within the trades. It was with a group of guys that were just so supportive. It really shifted a lot of some things that were kind of difficult for me in the past, having mostly worked with like queer or femme-identified folks, and it was
just a fear of the bias you were expecting,
Well, I guess it was just working in custom tinting like masonry, like it's a different environment, on these sites, and it was just a transition, then, and it was just really nice to be in metal fab with this great like group of people who are also artists in their own right. They also do, they have an artistic background too, and they're just passionate about invention, but also materials and making things. And that was exciting. I felt like I hit like,
The
the
jackpot.
end. Yeah, I hit the jackpot, and it was like, I don't know, it was so rewarding. Yeah, really rewarding.
And how long did you work
Mhm.
there? Did you stay there? Are you still there?
Well, yeah, I'm now in school, so
Mhm.
it was coming to the turning. I applied to be an apprentice through Discreet and Discreet with my boss, Tom. He had to get registered. I would have to say that, I really hope that the apprenticeship program and the Ontario College of Trades can sort of solidify themselves in this transitional period and become, the process is not always it's a lot of paperwork, and I hope that process becomes more efficient in the future. And for those reasons, I sort of, there's many reasons, but I'm still an apprentice with Tom. And if I come back to Toronto, then that would be that. I would like to continue, or at another place, depends. Or perhaps here in the US. But at the moment, school, it was sort of one of those moments where it's like
I gotta
either
go.
you keep
Yeah.
going or, and I just couldn't give up my art practice completely. And hopefully I see in the future the two being even more together. But for right now, I have to put the metal on pause. But I'm still working with metal, and yeah, I'm excited to hopefully I can get another part-time job in the summer. So we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a break now for our advertisers
Yeah.
and supporters. And when we come back, I want to talk to you about this. You stumbled on apprenticeship there. I could tell it was a struggle. And I want to talk to you about that struggle because I've worked with apprenticeship across Canada, and I know very much what you're talking about. And I think a lot of people probably would like to know that they're not alone in some of these things, right? So we're going to be right back here after these commercials here with Helen, and we're going to have a great conversation. So don't go anywhere.
The CWB Association is new and improved and focused on you. We offer a free membership with lots of benefits to anyone interested in joining an association that is passionate about welding. We are committed to educating, informing, and connecting our workforce. Gain access to your free digital publication of the Weld magazine, free online training, conferences, and lots of giveaways. Reach out to your local CWB Association chapter today to connect with other welding professionals and share welding as a trade in your community. Build your career, stay informed, and support the Canadian welding industry. Join today and learn more at cwbassociation.org.
Hi, and welcome back here to the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max, and as you know, we've been having a great conversation here with Helen Liene Dreifelds. Liene.
Liana. Yep.
Liene. All right. What nationality is Liene?
Latvian.
Are you from Latvia?
No, but my heritage on my mother's side.
Okay.
And I spoke Latvian growing up and very much part of that sort of Latvian
Community.
diaspora. Yeah.
Cool.
Mhm.
All right. So that's interesting to me. As an immigrant, I love hearing immigration stories. So
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I think I think there's a lot of importance in that story as well, and I think that's actually like a lot of, again, when we're talking about flattening, sometimes those are conversations that don't come out, but they are really much part of how we
people's
feel
fabric.
that-
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right. When we're going to talk about, apprenticeship. All right. So when we were talking about, getting signed up for apprenticeship, especially in Ontario. And so the more east you go, the harder it gets. The more west you go, the easier it gets, generally speaking, for apprenticeship. Now, in Ontario, we've heard a lot at multiple levels, whether it be colleges, standards, schools, whatever it is, about kind of the hodgepodge system of apprenticeship that exists in Ontario, where certain places have it, certain places don't. Some will follow, some don't. It's kind of a you're on your own type of system. That's very much a generalization, but for yourself, what was your experience like coming out of the West program, getting a job, and then trying to figure out how to pursue this career?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of the information is not streamlined, and I don't believe the intentions, I believe, are to encourage folks to come into the trades. We've heard it for a long time that, there is going to be a
Big
gap.
Yeah.
many people are highly skilled. However, they are,
On
looking
their way
towards retirement.
out, yeah.
Yeah, and then folks are coming in but are green, and there's no sort of like mentorship or like gap fill, and there's no sort of mid skill, let's say. There's either new or highly skilled. So there's like a gap. And in terms of like the sort of onboarding, it is not simple when there's an organization that is sort of changing, and their websites and just sort of like all the like kind of updating that was happening during the pandemic, mixed with the rush to try to create more jobs and employment, and the differentiation between the like sectors that are needing employment, but then the actual jobs and what actually leads to long-term financial, physical, etc. Like, I was really interested in working with the unions, but I was realizing that, that wouldn't necessarily be the best fit in terms of my specific interests. And also thinking through sort of the like location, as somebody who wasn't with a car at the time, and it needed to be somewhat accessible through transit or bike, a lot of that is available. I know that's very city centric, and that's not
No, but
always the case.
it's a struggle,
Oh,
and a lot of people live in urban centers, and most welding shops are not in urban centers.
Yeah, and I really wanted to do the full-time, where you can go to school full-time and then you go do that and then you go back to your employer, but there's not a lot of options for that. There was primarily part-time. I made my choices of the places. I called the universities like Conestoga, like all these different places I was really excited about. Nobody knew when the course would start. It's like there was just no communication that seemed to be happening between the places offering the education and then the ministry. And that mixed in with, the shop has to run, we can't spend all day calling everyone, and it took some time to get the place where I was working to be registered with the ministry. So, and I'm so grateful to my boss and my coworkers.
That he did that,
Yeah, it's huge. Like, I'm so like honored that was something, there's a lot of trust put into that, and I couldn't have done it without, but, I was supposed to, be on the list for the next session, but it was still uncertain. And I applied to school as well, and, never thought I would get in, and I did. And so, since that came first, I decided to leave to come to school, because at the end of the day, all of these moves are for, long-term job stability and financial security. A lot of the reasons why I came to the West program and the Women in Trades is like I was highly underemployed for most of my working career thus far, with a lot of different like low wage, contract, part-time, hours cut, sure, perhaps be due to like desiring flexibility within an art practice, but also at the, one could do both,
they're not mutually exclusive,
Yeah, and the like traditional model of like sort of a full-time Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 doesn't work for many people. And I think that there is, we see the changes that are happening in workplaces, and I think a lot of the work can still happen with varying schedules or varying types of,
shifts or accommodations.
Yeah, like you're working remotely, so it's like, or I'm assuming, but like there's also.
I'm actually on a cruise ship right now as a fake background, though, just as if.
No, and I mean, there's like positives and negatives to all these different sort of, but I think that's sort of a question for the trades, is how to innovate within like the idea of how work can be done. And it can be, I think, the brain is plastic, growth mindset is possible. And I'm really excited for that, for the trades. I think there's so much possibility. It's just a question of,
there, and I think that there's space for everything. So I think what happens in the industry or in conversations or even in human beings generally is that it's always like an all or nothing idea. It's always like I'm all the way there or I'm all the way not there. And reality, life is not like that. It's not, just from one extreme to the other. So you have an industry that has been evolved from the Industrial Revolution to be almost like a punitive task of creating widgets. And you start at some ungodly morning hour at 6 a.m. because it costs less to heat or whatever industrial, systems were to create these work hours. And now we've, evolved our societies around these work hours. Now, on the other end, there's this idea that, well, these are resources and they're almost like luxury resources or infrastructure resources that we're creating, that they're not necessarily dependent on that time structure. They can be flexibility. There can be a plasticity to it. There can be, a change in the narrative of how work is done. Now, It doesn't mean you have to abandon the old system, because I do understand the need for, say, a 24-hour, 3-shift type of employment where timing, it's just a timing thing. There's only, there's 3 shifts of 8 hours each. That's a 24 hours a day. And that's to mine the coal out of the ground, because that is a 24-hour job. Yeah, fine. But there also is going to be new industries that are going to be flexible. And it's up to you as the consumer, as a worker, to be like, this is what I want to do, or this is what I want to do. What is it that I need to fulfill myself? Because some people love the structure of a regulated, regimented time slot, right? And some people don't, right?
Totally. Yeah, I don't think they're conflictual. I think many options are possible and work will be done. And I'm excited for, thinking through how the trades could change. And one of my coworkers went to trade school in Alberta, and just thinking through their curriculum is just a lot more thorough. And I wish that for, not that the CWB program wasn't thorough, more just in the
that's
sense
a short program, though. It's not like an actual
program. Yeah, but it was so rich in terms of its information in a short period of time. And I hope for more of that sort of thing could happen in Ontario, or like a different system that, really everybody has to do all the parts. Everybody has to weld or do everything. And if they wish to become an engineer, they could, but everyone has to start from understanding how to sweep the floor all the way up to understanding the structural integrity of a building. I just really think that thoroughness rather than jumping or, yeah.
And that is something that we have more in the West. I'm in Saskatchewan. You look at Alberta's apprenticeship model, Saskatchewan's apprenticeship model. We very much have that tiered kind of approach of everyone's going to learn the same stuff so that we're all on the same page and we can all talk to each other. And then once you get to this certain level, you get your red seal. And then you're not done. That's your red seal is kind of just now you're allowed to come in. It's like being a doctor. I always say, you go to med school, you don't get to touch a patient while you're in med school. You don't get to touch a patient until you've already gone to get your job at the hospital. And even when you get your job at the hospital, you're not allowed to touch a patient until you do 2 years of what's it called? Like an internship, or no, it's not. Yeah. I forget what it's called. But it's like the beginning of your journey, school, not the end of it. And it's the same with welding. You go to school, you do your 3 levels, you get your journey person. You're just starting. You just scratched the surface.
Totally.
Now what's next? Metal fab, welding engineering technologist, engineering, or are you happy there? Because there's something to be said about, loving your job and just staying where you are. That's totally dope too, right?
For sure. Yeah, and maybe that's something that's exciting about something like welding or metal fabrication, is that there's always some other aspect to learn, and it is contextual. Like working with stainless, very different than working with aluminum, working with steel. Yeah, I just think that there's a lot of potential. Yeah.
So now that you're in this program for art, how far along are you in it right now?
So I'm just almost finishing up my first year. So I'm pretty much halfway through, I guess.
Okay, so you're about halfway through. You're probably not really seeing the glow of the end on the horizon yet. Probably still too buried in the sand for that. But at some point, you're going to start seeing that finish line.
Yes.
When that comes as an art major, you'll have some tough choices. I watched my daughter go through these tough choices and be like, can I pull this off? Is there going to be a job? Is there a career in this? Or is this something that I devoted and that I'm going to have to do off the side of the desk for my other real job, in quotation marks, right? How do you see your vision of you coming out of this program with your art, your welding background? Is there a desire to go back to welding and finish off that journey person so you can at least have that in your pocket and be done with it? Or do you want to just jump into the art world and see how far that goes while you're still hot on that track?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I don't really think of like, like things as like day job or one negatively influencing the other. I think that I guess I'm really interested in creating a way of making money but like that doesn't making money and being able to have financial stability, but also continuing like my purpose in things. So whatever format that takes, yeah, of course, teaching has been a thorough line throughout. So teaching is always interesting. I had thought at one point to create like a sort of like a women and women identified sort of art installation company, as one option. And definitely, yeah, at one point I was thinking I would continue my apprenticeship perhaps in the States or come back to Canada and finish that. But I think at this point in a program that is really like a professionalization program and is quite rigorous, my first goal for sure is, my artistic career. But I don't think that doesn't include welding. And I don't think that doesn't exclude like a journey person, is just finding how to make those two things align.
Well, and you're young, like these things are going to weave out however they weave, right? So
yeah, I'm young, but I'm also old. Like I'm 36 now, so
that's young, girl. You got lots of time.
Yeah, but I've I'm looking forward to sort of having that more stability.
Well, stability is a very interesting term because it's very much a phenomenon, a personal phenomenon, right? Like, you talk to, when I talk to students and young women, especially when I talk to people from, kind of the disenfranchised groups or the fringe groups of society, I don't like using the term money. I don't like using the term dollars. I like using the terms like stability, because financial stability for me might be very different than financial stability for you, and vice versa. Financial stability could be $100 a week living on your parents' couch, and that's fine. If that's what is stable for you and you feel mentally well like that, that's fantastic. But if your mental, financial stability, especially if you have a family, if you're a young parent, then your financial stability requires more. So then what can you do with that? One of the things I always say to young parents, I was a young parent too, is that welding offers benefits, and that's something people don't talk about very much. It's like, if you're a young parent, that paycheck matters less than that benefits package, because not worrying about your kids' medicine or doctor's visits or dentists or any of that stuff is a huge weight off your back. Or if your kid struggles in school and they need private speech pathology or autism help, or neurodivergent in some way, having an insurance program is huge, because those things are not cheap and they're not covered by the government, right? So now, for an artist, like I watched my daughter as a musician, her idea of financial stability was having a gig or having a place for her to be able to express herself, because that gave her the stability that she felt as an artist that she needed, right? Now, you said you're old at 36, or almost 37, you said?
Yes.
And that, what does stability look like for you? Does stability look like buying a house, which is like an almost impossible measure now? Or does it look like, having installations that you're constantly in demand for your work, for the art? What does that look like in your vision?
Yeah. I think it's one of the first times in my life that I don't have 5 jobs while I'm here at school. And I am so grateful for this opportunity to be in school to do that. So I think it's a tricky one for me to know what that looks like. You know, I guess one idea would be to have one job or 2 jobs only,
Max,
or
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, or just not always feeling like it's at the edge, you know, or wondering, you know, no, perhaps it's like moving past entry level positions, you know, that would be a sense, or having a sense of like confidence in one's skills, you know. I think that's maybe one of the like, it's maybe more of a mental barrier rather than
And confidence is a big one because
yeah.
statistics, science has shown that people are more willing to purchase something from someone who exudes confidence than someone who does not, regardless of the product, which is
Right.
which is a
Yeah.
crazy thing, you know.
Yeah. I think there's lots for me to learn still within the trades to have that confidence that there will always be a job there for me. But I do feel like that transition from sort of the contract social work or social servicey, or like I worked in hospitality for a long time, like, or gig jobs, you know, it's just been really nice to know that something that I do with my, you know, skills could, not that those work jobs are not unskilled, because I think they're highly skilled, but that it would be more financially valuable is like been a real shift in mentality. But I do wonder, as we go into another recession, and I do wonder if like what that stability would look like. But I am hopeful.
Yeah, I'm always full of hope. I'm the eternal positivist. I don't believe
Yeah.
it. I don't even believe in recessions. I don't even believe in all that. I think it's just all scope of perception because you know, you have, and maybe because I came from a very, you know, as a refugee, you only got one way to go, and that's up, right? So it kind of gives you an aspect of life that it's always going to be okay. You just, you know, get out there and work as long as you're able and healthy. The rest will
For
fall in
sure.
line, you know, type of idea. But
Yeah.
stability, I love that we're having this conversation because that's something I think a lot of people get stuck on, as much as we're getting stuck on it, because
Yeah.
everyone talks about being stable, but then when you flip the question and say, okay, what's stability for you? Well, I don't know. Like it's a tough thing to answer. Like, I think validation is a form of stability, to know that the things that you've invested in your life aren't wasted, which I would never say to someone that you've wasted a moment. I don't believe that there's such a thing as waste. I was at a conference in South America last year where I had this incredible genius doctor in his 70s give a presentation, and he said, first line of his presentation was, show me in nature where the garbage pile is. There's no such thing as garbage. Nature doesn't create garbage. Nothing is wasted. Nothing will ever be wasted. And that includes your time. So I love that idea because, you know, as you age, you want to have some validation that all the work you've done in a variety of things, whatever it is, can all come together to play some part in your success, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm
I
getting
guess
real deep here.
no, I think it's just interesting. I think that's like different semantics and different versions, you know. I'm not gonna lie, like at the end of the day, it would be nice to have an income that matches higher than like, you know, the baseline, you know. But yeah, I think also that certain skills are valued more in certain structures that we live in. But I think that there's you can do a lot with not very much. And yeah, I guess stability, I guess, is always a shifting target, because it depends on what, you know, I'm thinking through all the different stages of one's life that I've already had, and that stability, you know, the couch analogy versus like thinking about, oh, what would it be like to make X amount of money and like an hour? Like, is that possible? Or like, what would that look like? How would my life change? Like, you know, if I wasn't worried about something, how would that look like,
What kind of freedom would I have if I don't have to worry about feeding myself, right?
Yeah. And I think like a lot of change for me happened because of the West program and the job with Discrete and Discrete that like really shifted that prior mentality of, just always a scarcity thinking. And, there's something really powerful to find an internal stability, regardless of how, like, not knowing when what your next job will be, but thinking that, trusting that you can find a job and that you have, I guess that's like the internal shift. And maybe that's something I'm still sort of grappling with. And like that belief that that I will be employed again or, yeah.
And you will be. Like, I mean, I can tell you that with just pure confidence. The welding industry is just that type of industry. It's one of the bragging points. I got into welding when I was 17, and I've been to university. I've been different trades. I've done different things. I've young parent, musician, all these things. But at the end of the day, whenever I was like, "Ooh, I gotta get my feet back under me," welding was always there, and that's why I think people talk about recessions. Welding doesn't really have recessions because recessions are for like the first thing you do is trim luxury in a recession. Welding is not really necessarily a luxury item. It's kind of a thing that's needed to keep the wheels turning on society, going back to like the Romans. So like, I mean, it's not going anywhere anytime soon,
Yeah, like the trades will for sure, like that's something that's really interesting, moving away from like hospitality or teaching positions. Like sure, teaching will always be there, but there are cutbacks and things like that. Like hospitality is definitely seasonal, or it has its ups and downs, but trades, there's something really great about being able to build something.
Do you see, and like, I mean, this might be the obvious connection, but perhaps it's not, that you will do metal art as, going forward? Like, do people have an expectation of you, perhaps even in school, saying, hey, welding, you're in art school, show me or teach me or, whatever it is?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. Like there's metal in the work that I've been making recently. And I'm excited to learn more. And yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think about artworks within like a medium specificity, like metal art or in that way.
You're not like in 6 months from now, I'm going to do a metal piece.
I mean, there's like metal that will be involved in some pieces, but yeah, I guess I think of like my like driving point is usually from like a concept or an idea of my research that I've been doing, and then coming to the material through that. But metal is definitely something that has so many different associations that it will most likely be in most of the work I make. Yeah, but I'm not necessarily.
If it happens, it happens.
Yeah. And I think there's something interesting about sort of, working, whatever the project or the research or the main like question you're like scratching at, something, the material will appear for what that
it'll like present itself.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that might sound a bit esoteric or like kind of like
I'm buying it.
What's she talking about? But, yes, I will make some metal stuff. I don't necessarily think I'd call it metal art, but yes, there'll be some metal in the future, and I'm excited to weld. Yeah, and in terms of like teaching people or things like that, like I mean, I think within the arts, like there's always sort of like knowledge share. Or at least like my ethos is like, if I know something else, I'll show you. Like we're all here to learn. Nothing is, we're all here to share what we know. So yeah, I've been really interested. I've been doing a lot of metal casting recently. That's something new I've been learning about. So that's been really exciting.
Sand casting or plaster casting or
resin sand. I'd love to do some lost wax. We've been doing some iron pours here too, so that's exciting. So all those days of lifting stairs and
Yeah,
like
you're good.
doing that kind
You got all the
of
muscles now for it.
I'm grateful. Yeah, all those
Yeah.
days in the park with the 16-year-old boys trying to do pull-ups with them, Yeah, like learning how to, yeah, that kind of thing. It's been good. It's been good work. It's been applicable to lots of different things.
Awesome. Well, I got a couple more questions for you. We're getting close to the end of the interview here,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm interested. Earlier, you said one of the things that you really focus on in your art study is the use of space, right?
Mm,
And you made
mm,
that comment, and the use of space is something that comes very much to the forefront in the world of metal fabrication, because
mm,
a lot of people often ask me, like, what's the difference between a welder and a fabricator?
mm,
And welders work within the spectrum of the weld quality, weld speed, all these things that have to do with the joining of materials together. The
mm,
fabricator has to be much more concerned with the space, the shifting, the movements,
mm.
and even in terms of being able to visualize the finished constructed piece from a 2D drawing and put it in your head and understand it. And it's something I've said to many people, like a good fabricator is able to look at something and visualize it in his head and be able to spin it and move it and
Yeah.
actually be able to pick something out from your mind that in reality is wrong. Be like, oh, that's not right. And then being able to connect the two. So from like a
Mhm,
mental spatial recognition to a physical matter. That
mhm,
sounds a little
mhm.
wishy-washy, but it is something that
No,
happens in the
it is.
fabrication world. Like, and some people don't have that, and that's fine. But some people just don't have that, and they struggle with fabrication because they're constantly trying to interpret 2D into 3D, and you got to go to
Mhm.
like the 4D to really get it right. Now, in your world, in studying space, explain to me what that means to you in the art context, and if you see that connection to what I just said.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you were saying, like, there's sort of two ways to think about it. There's like one sort of from like the technical aspect, like, you're essentially creating like an isometric drawing within your head, or you're doing the CAD program. SolidWorks is happening
Mm-hmm.
already without the SolidWorks. And I do think that folks um, can learn. And I think that that sort of spatial awareness I really learned from like my coworkers, like Sean Kosnick is like amazing. He like can see, he's got like a ruler in his head, it's like
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah. And like also like, yeah, there's different, like, I would say, yeah, so there's that aspect. And then I guess you could also think about it philosophically, like in terms of like parallel worlds or the multiverse or sort of that kind of thinking of
Mm-hmm.
how this is expanded past this particular moment. But in terms of the sculpture program, I mean, I think that's like always a question about the relationship between form and content, and also sort of like social context is like a large portion of the discussions, particularly when you're working with materials or content that has like a particular social significance.
Mm-hmm.
So like space is not only like the transforming materials into 3D shape, or creating that within your mind, but it's also creating an understanding of the sort of social geography or what is happening in a social context, what that meaning is, how does that impact relations, that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
would be a way to think about it. But I think it's a larger question, like, thinking about spatial theory versus like pictorial theory or like the figurative, or the surface within painting. Those are sort of spatial theory in some ways maybe has been less researched or talked about in an explicit way, just because of maybe I wonder like how the screen has sort of collapsed space in some way, in different formats,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
And when you talk
yeah.
about like the social awareness
Hmm.
of your form or of the art base,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's another interesting thing because that's also affecting the welding industry. I was at
Yeah.
a conference and there was a lady from Denmark talking about the social responsibility of welding, how that
Hmm.
exists on the corporate level, but on a personal level. To understand
Hmm.
that, for me to do this welding, I'm burning fossil fuels and I'm, using energy to produce something that has a footprint. It increases my footprint as a human on this planet. But also there's the counterbalance of the fact that steel is the most recyclable product that we know. So at the end of the day, everything I invest into this, I will be able to be pulled back out, which you can't say for very many materials.
No.
So in your world, in the art world, you know, what does steel represent, or what could it represent? Because for me, I would see it as something eternal. And I've had that feeling even when I've built things out of stainless in industrial applications, and I've thought to myself as I'm welding up this stainless thing that this will last forever. This thing will be here in the ground in 10,000 years. You know, the world will have blown itself to bits. The next people will have evolved, or aliens will come, and they'll dig out this stupid thing and be like, hey, this is still here. I have a piece of that connection.
Yeah.
I don't think about that with brick. I don't think about that with wood. You know, like you look at archaeological digs, and, you know, something 10,000 years ago made out of wood is barely recognizable if it exists at all, right? Is that the same world? Am I in the same world as your world, or am I in a different world? Like...
No, I mean, I think there's many worlds within a world, right? So I don't think I can speak for like the art world, but I am interested in what you're saying about the eternal aspect, or like, you know, and the recyclability, but that it's also a resource extraction. But I guess, like, you know, it's complicated. I think that steel represents in many ways sort of like
strength.
Yeah, but also it's like counterpart of like its imposition, or its imposition on severity or austerity, or like its prominence. It sort of like can in some ways be a representation of like the structures that exist already. And I guess I am dually interested in how, you know, the textile is always, you know, if you go back to the archaeological digs, it's always a fragment, because and it's only been preserved oftentimes if it was like encased in or within something more durable. And I wonder a lot about the things that are perhaps invisible, but that have had just as large of an impact on civilizations, and like things like that, and like the power of something that is maybe so imperceivable, like, you know, how dust can shift an environment but you can't see it, or how you know. So I guess I think about steel in like both its austereness, but also how it hides, you know, it too can be so fragile, you know, and like something that is perceived as fragile can be so strong, or like you know. So I guess I think a lot about that. And even just in working with metal, you know, it's interesting seeing like undergraduate students start working with metal for the first time, and like sort of like the aggression they might approach to the material. But it's funny because
like, back up, be gentle,
be gentle. Like you'll get that whole, if you just let up a little bit, you know, you need force, but not that much. Or like, you know, and even thinking about my own like kind of relationship, you know, metal is actually quite soft. You know, it has like different, you know.
It's my favorite medium. People are like, isn't wood easier? You're a metal art, you know, you're into metal. Wouldn't wood be easier because it's lighter? And to me, wood is the hardest medium to work with. Like by far, I would rather build a house out of feathers than wood. Like honestly, like.
Well, it's tricky. It's like wood is such a. Also, like, I mean, there's so many different types of wood, just as there's types of metal, but like it's living in a different way. So you're working with this other entity, and maybe in some ways it's more akin to like a textile in that it's like has that sort of living quality. But I don't know. I guess, am I sort of what you're saying, or is this getting a little bit too...
No, I love it. I mean, my undergrad was philosophy. I could do this all day. So...
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah.
So what's on the horizon? You know, what's the end state that you see, you know, for yourself? And I kind of feel like I already know your answer for this because we danced around it a little bit, but you know, you got a lot of things on the horizon. You're going to a fantastic program right now, which I'm sure is teaching you a million things, which is what they're supposed to do. You know, you're in the States right now. You kind of thought about, you know, living in the States or coming back to Canada. Are you just taking it as it comes, or is there or is there kind of the next step you're hoping to get to a certain point soon, outside of the stability in the previous conversation, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is a question of what opportunities present themselves, and it's not just like letting things come to you, but it's also pursuing them. There's a few different like sort of art residencies and of course fellowships or teaching opportunities that would be wonderful. And also there's some fab shops that I'm really like, you know, hoping to reach out to or see if they would take me on. So a lot of it depends on, it depends
Luck?
on a lot of different factors. It depends on like luck. And I think somehow I feel like I have had a lot of luck in my life. So I'm
Well,
very
you make luck. I firmly believe.
Yeah.
Like I'm not very much into the, I guess, the spiritual. I don't know. I don't know. I don't. I'm not really superstitious. I'm not really into any of that stuff. I wouldn't call myself an atheist, but I'm heavily agnostic. But I definitely believe in energy because that's just science. And I believe in energy, and I believe that like attracts like. Welding is an exact example of positive and negative creating something. And that's life. That's life. If I push positive out, I get positive back, and that's on me. That's on me, right?
Yeah. It's, you know, it is interesting, you know, the ability to believe in some change being possible, you know? I guess I'm not really answering your question quite concretely, but I'm excited for what will come next and just to be able to hopefully continue to pursue my practice that will also include welding. I guess I'm just excited to be alive. You know?
What's next?
I guess that's like maybe the like joy of the academic bubble, you know, of like just getting to be learning, like the knowledge for knowledge's sake, you know.
It's a very wonderful privilege. It really is.
It really is, and I don't take it lightly. Like I never would have imagined this for myself, and it's amazing, and I hope to have some form of that, you know, going forward. And
understanding it and appreciating it is going to guarantee that you give it back out, right? Because you're ingesting all this knowledge, which is also energy, and like a battery, it's going to have to go somewhere, right? It'll go out, it'll go into your art, obviously. That is a reservoir of that energy, but it'll also go into other people, right?
And I'm excited for what might come. So
to wrap up the interview, let's go over a couple. I want to ask you just maybe one or two final questions.
Yeah, of course.
First of all, you know, as a female, and you know, in these, I would say, welding is a non-traditional pathway for women, which I hope that changes, but we're a long way from that right now. You know, what advice would you give to perhaps someone in your own situation who's kind of like come up, tried a few things, you know, feel pretty good about life, but is looking for something a little bit better. And they're thinking about welding. You know, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting. I think that in any situation, and I think it's, you know, it's obviously things are different as a white woman working within the trades. If I'm a person of color, and also if I'm trans or if I'm queer.
That intersectionality of a variety of things.
Yeah, intersectionality makes a huge, and I think the trades really, it depends on where it's so contextual. But, you know, it is something to be, you know, the only one on site, whatever that is, you know, the only one. But I think you know, some folks have asked me the question here in school as well, like, how do I relate gender to working in these sort of male-dominated or perceived male-dominated fields? And I guess for me, I just always think about, like, your goal, like the pursuit of lifelong learning and the pursuit of, like, you know, trying a skill, like, and the pursuit of excellence. So, like, your brain is plastic. There's a growth mindset. One person is not X, Y, Z. There are there's ways to learn. And I guess I just think about what has, like, you know, you might have a tough day, you didn't do the thing right, somebody says something, it really throws you off, or like whatever might come up. You know, if you concentrate on the skill and like learning from folks who are just as passionate about the skill and doing good work and believing in a group, like you can't do something alone, you work together. If like you can find that, then I think there's, that's sort of like what I think about when going into a space that might be unfamiliar or where you might feel like you're the odd person out, you know?
And there's something to be said about the experience, and this is a fine line. So like, I'm a person of color. I didn't know English growing up. It was, you know, there's situations that happen. I live in a very, I would say, fairly racist part of the country, Saskatchewan. I've experienced a lot of racism, even recently, just last week at the airport, I had an incident. But you take those situations and you learn from them. They're still learning to be taken from a bad situation, right? And a lot of it is how you react, because you want to be an advocate of change, and you definitely don't want to leave things on the table that you felt like you should have done. That's not a great feeling. But you also want to be aware that there's ways to do change that are not going to give that negative, you're not going to amplify the negative message. You don't want to amplify the negative message. What you want to do is you just want to overwrite that negative message with hopefully overwhelming positivity, right? Like that's kind of like the angle.
Totally. I think there's something to be said about choosing your battles. And I think also, you know, also recognizing your own, where you might play into something as well. So like being aware, like a self-reflexive aspect to it as well. And so I just think, it's important to stay on the focus of a different world is possible, I think, as hard as that is, and like as fucked up as certain things can be, and you're just like, how the is this happening? And you know,
it swallows a lot of people up. I have friends who are swallowed right now.
You know, I'm not gonna lie, like there's days that, you know, you gotta go, you know, sort of dissociate, or you go somewhere else.
Compartmentalize,
compartmentalize, and that has its impact or its repercussions on the body, on the sense of self. It's, you know, there's a lot of, I would say that there is a need for an inner strength, you know, but that's also with like a huge like level of empathy. A lot of the times when folks say stuff, it comes from a place, and it's trying to understand that place.
Yeah, they're hurting too somehow.
Yeah, I guess so. And I think, you know, as a white woman, it's also important to recognize when things happen on site that you don't want to sit for as well. And like that sort of, but there's ways to do things that I think are through showing rather than saying. And I think that's where, you know, if ever in a leadership position, like to lead in a way that is, you know, truly equitable rather than, and that is a different thing than
that's
equality.
Tough. Yeah, it
or,
is.
you know, if you want to be justice oriented as well as a leader, I think that requires a certain level of like self-reflection and also knowledge of your coworkers and what is, you know, what is close to them and how to change an environment. But I guess I feel like I'm getting a little esoteric again, but yes, I would say
it's true. Like it's a pendulum swing. It's not a static line, right?
Yeah. And like also like just like practicals, like you don't like the job, move.
Yeah. Move,
you know, honestly, get yourself set up, like call on your friends. Like we had we had a women in trades like WhatsApp where like we would share like if there was a job posting or like share like, you know, this employer, don't work there, don't work, you know, it's like that. Those are like practical kind of things. Also like having, you know, there's like the, hey, how's it going to the other, like another woman on site is like a nice way to like also finding the bathrooms, finding which bathrooms go to, like, is there a coffee shop or like a place, you know, or like you can ask your site, like the site manager or foreman, like, hey, can you make a bathroom that locks, like just certain things that can provide you safety. And then also I like to look, like scan a space and see who is interacting in what way and who would be someone that you can sort of shadow or work with, that you can have each other's back. Because a lot of the things you have to really trust each other, because
Mentorship is a huge part of this trade.
Yeah, and like, you can get hurt real easy, and it doesn't matter, a woman, a man, whatever.
We all die the same.
Yeah. So it's like you really have to see who's working and moving in a way that looks like they are looking out for themselves and one another, and then look to build relationships that way, and I think like there's a power of a domino effect of like, it doesn't take much to shift a space. I think like it can happen. So yeah, I guess those are the main things: growth mindset, pursue excellence, reach out to other people to create
create those mentorship opportunities. Those are all great, valid points.
Yeah. And I think it's important to sometimes, I think, to shift the conversation from what's it like being a woman in non-traditional, or like in a male dominated or majority male, like how do we shift that conversation? Like, let's start from a different angle. How do we create an environment that is uplifting, exciting for everyone, where everyone is valued? Like I think a space that is good for a woman is also a space that is good for many, or like like if it's like less of this like accommodation mentality, but it's a centering. Well,
accommodations come from equality, not equity, right? It's kind of the two kind of ways to look at it. But it is tough, and I'm in a leadership position, and it's I try very hard to not make the same mistakes that I've witnessed, because it's easy to repeat mistakes if you've seen them, or if you're a part of systems that are you consider to be not great. Then you yourself, continue with that same system. And I'm kind of like a chaos in a box. So it's tough at the best of times to know what I'm going to do. So, but
no one is perfect, and like, it's that self-reflexivity, like constant learning. Yeah.
Now, last question I got for you. How do people find your art? How do people see what you do? How do people know where you are? I definitely want to check it out. Like tell me how to do it. Tell everyone how to do it.
Sure. Yeah. So my Instagram is H__L__D. So nice and cryptic. And then my website is my full name. So HelenLiene Dreifelds.com. And those are two spots that you can see some of my older work on my website, and then some of the newer things that I'm thinking about. And there's, of course, the Yale School of Art, their webpage as well. You can see all of my cohort and things like that. So
Awesome. Well, is there any shout outs you'd like to send out to anybody? Any hellos or anything?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just like a huge shout out to the D&D team, like Discreet and Discreet. So that's Tom King, Sean Kosnick, Gideon Naff. There's also Lucas. There's so many folks that are involved there. So just big shout out. I'm so grateful. And of course, Donna and Danny for, and the Women in Trades program too at George Brown. Like, I couldn't have done I wouldn't have imagined all this for myself. So it's thanks to those programs.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And I think I'm going to follow up with you, because I think this might be a good article for our magazine too. So we may be knocking on your door again here, but thank you so much, Helen. This has been a fantastic interview. I've really enjoyed the talk, and I love how we got really deep there. That's my jam. I can do that. We definitely need to sit down and have a beer sometime and really get into the I mean, we didn't even touch on cosmology. Like, I mean, that's where that's a whole part of, I got a book on it right there in my book. So.
I'm excited for our philosophical questions and thoughts.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Max. Yeah. Have a good day.
All right. And for all the people that have been listening and following along here on the podcast, thank you so much. Make sure you continue to download, share, and comment. And please send us your suggestions. We're always receiving great suggestions from our audience for people that you think are just cool or got a great story. And like you all know who follow the show, I have no boundaries. We can go from students to CEOs. It doesn't matter to me. Everyone's got a story and we all need to hear them. So thank you very much. And I'll catch you at the next show.
We hope you enjoyed the show.